Welcome to the Savvy Ladies Wednesday Wisdom webinar. I'm Maggie Montemuro, and I'm the Marketing Manager at Savvy Ladies. If you have a question during the webinar, you can type it into the chat box. If you're joining us by phone, you can email your question to info@savvyladies.org. Today's presenter is Stephanie Shalofsky, founder of the Organizing Zone. Stephanie works with small companies and solopreneurs to help them gain control over their work environment, resulting in improving productivity and profits. She combines her years of corporate employment with her impressive organizing credentials, including membership in NAPO and its New York chapter. Stephanie also has training as a certified productive environment specialist, and her non-judgmental and empathetic style enable her to create highly functional and organized workspaces for her clients. Thanks for being with us, Stephanie, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks for the introduction and for the invitation to participate and lead today's webinar. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to get started, and I'd like to start by sharing some information that's not in my professional bio. I have to confess, I really love to collect shoes. Whenever I'm in the store, I always stop by the shoe department, regardless of whether or not I actually need more shoes. And there's this phenomenon that occurs. I either find 3 pairs I must have or none at all. On those days that I do find the shoes I need and want, I happily take them home, and once I get here and open my closet door, there's a dose of reality. There is no more room. But no worries, I have a system in place, and I know what I'm going to do because I can't be tripping over the shoe boxes. Very much will be the same for you. You'll have the same kind of clarity as it results, or I should say, as it addresses, as you address your workspace by the end of this webinar. You'll have systems and strategies that you can apply, so you'll be back in control of your desk, your papers, and your email. So let's get started. So we have 3 representations of some of the most common challenges. We've got the paper, the piles, the clutter that it causes. We've got time management challenges, the to-do list, scheduling time on our calendars effectively. And then we have email, which is a challenge for just about everybody that I know. Before I move on, I just wanted to share the following statistic. Did you know that 1 hour of uninterrupted time where you're really focusing specifically on one task is equivalent to 4 hours of normal productivity? Okay, so think about how much you can get done in that 1 hour if you just shut off all of the distractions. So it's something to keep in mind, especially when you have a high priority, high profile kind of task you're trying to accomplish. So in order to address our challenges, we need to start looking at the big picture. And by that I mean, let's start looking at your environment. And what I'm going to do is call it a productive environment. That's what needs to be created. And it's not just your desk. A productive environment is a setting in which everything around you supports who you are and who you want to be. You create this environment by managing your space and your information as well as your activities. Of course, there are lots of challenges. There's the papers, there's the piles that result because we don't know what to do with them. There's the clutter that's all over our desk, which is very distracting. I, for one, will notice that if I'm working on something on my computer and all of a sudden my attention is sort of shifting to the left and to the right, I know that I'm being distracted by whatever has accumulated. And I immediately stop what I'm doing, take no more than 1 minute, and clear all the excess. So that way, when I go back to focus on my laptop and the document I'm working on, I know it'll have 100% of my attention. So to address our challenges, we really need to have access to all the tools that will help us manage our information and as well as our calendar. So we do that by creating a command center. And there are 7 components to a command center. You have to have a dedicated workspace, and this is especially important for those of you who are work from home all the time or even periodically. We need to have an inbox, an outbox, and other trays as appropriate. Files are important. Even though a lot of us are trying to be paperless, there's still paper. So we need action files, reference files, archives. Next, we need to have a to-do list, whether it be paper or digital, it doesn't matter. Whatever's your preference, that's the way to go. Same thing with the calendar. Paper or digital, doesn't matter. Just figure out the one that works best for you. We need a contact management system. We need a way to collect all of the data for all of our key contacts, and also a mechanism that will help us uh, stay in contact with them and follow up with them when appropriate. And lastly, we need to have a way to get rid of the excess paper. So we need a garbage pail, a shredder, a recycling bin. So once we have our command center, we can really focus on creating some really effective systems and procedures. And my two suggestions here are to first, keep them really simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Make it something that's easy for you as the creator to follow and start to implement, as well as for you to teach others that will be using it. In addition, don't be a perfectionist. If you wait to create the perfect system, it's just never going to happen. So give it your best shot, come up with something that you think is going to be effective, and then test drive it. Give it a week or 10 days, and then ask yourself, is it working? Do you like it? Because if you like it, you're more apt to use it. Also, is it working for others that are impacted by it? You have to keep in mind that if you're working in an organization where you have a team and there are different groups or departments within your company, something that you're creating for your team might also impact another part of the company or another group in the company, so it has to work for everybody. And, and also remember that all new systems are basically changes in habits. And changes in habits can take up to 21 days to become more routine. So in order to really be successful, you don't want to try to implement too many changes at one time. So do them over a period of time, phase them in, so that you will guarantee success. Okay, so we've got a command center now. We've got a sense of what to do about creating some systems. So let's talk about the paper. So let me tell you about John. John is a successful partner in a large law firm. He's got the corner office overlooking the New York Harbor. Fabulous views. Everybody that comes to his office is immediately taken by the view outside the window. When they finally shift their gaze to John and his desk, they're a little taken aback. There's 12 inches of paper all the way across the desk, side to side, end to end. With John, it all started with that one piece of paper he put down because he didn't know what to do with it. Before he knew it, it morphed into a pile. And then there were other piles, and the piles just kept coming. It's totally out of control. He lives in a constant state of chaos, but he doesn't know what to do about it. He can't figure out how to dig himself out, how to get started. And that was the question he asked me. And I retorted by saying, "Do you have 8 hours?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay." So we sorted and we purged and we created a paper flow process. By the end of the 8 hours, all but one pile had been cleared. And he knew exactly what to do with this last pile of paper. He was most definitely back in control. So paper is such a challenge because even in our somewhat paperless world, there's still paper. There's new mail that comes in every day. We are our own worst enemies because we print emails, we print extra copies of documents, and then we forget we have them and we print another set. So there's a constant, never-ending funnel of paper crossing our desks. In addition, we don't know what to do with it, or we can't make decisions about it. We feel incapable of making those decisions. A, because we might not feel confident in our ability to do so for whatever reasons, or we think we need more information and we never get that information, so that the decision is forever procrastinated and postponed and never happens. So when we are creating strategies for paper, it's really key to remember the following two things. First off, like anything else that you might be organizing, paper needs a home, and you need to know where that home is, and that home needs to make sense to you. In addition, wherever that home may be, you need to be able to retrieve the paper within seconds. So keep that in mind as you're developing some strategies for yourself. Now, a strategy that really works well for processing the paper that maybe has accumulated on your desk or that constantly comes to you every day of your daily operations is FAT. FAT is an acronym that was coined by my colleague, Barbara Hemphill. It stands for file, very straightforward, act. Okay, some action might be required. Possibly the paper has information related to a task that needs to be done. So it needs to be added to your to-do list. Maybe there's a business card with new contact information. So that needs to go into your CRM system. Maybe you need to delegate something, the task or that piece of paper needs to go to a colleague. So it goes into your outbox. So as you can see, you're basically integrating the command center tools that you set up in this process. And then toss, T. Basically, we're going to get rid of anything you don't need or don't want. So that's where the trash pail and the recycling bin and the shredder come into play. So it's all very integrated as you will see. Okay, so the real problem with paper is what do we keep and how to make those decisions. In order to try to facilitate this process for you, I'm going to give you some pointers, some questions to ask yourself. The first question is, when you're looking at a piece of paper, is there some action required? And very much like we were talking about with the A in FAT, is it a phone number? Is it a task? Is it something that goes into your contact management system? So basically, some activity. Those are probably the easier pieces of paper to process through. Okay, then you have a situation where you're not sure what to do with a piece of paper. So the question to ask yourself is, where can I get another copy? If you can answer this question, then you can very easily make a decision. So is it something that you maybe downloaded from the internet, which means that you can always retrieve the information? Is it something that a colleague or an associate created, so you know who the go-to person is for that particular document? So once you start identifying the source of the information, it's so much easier to decide whether or not you need to keep it. And lastly, this last question helps put everything in perspective. And it is, what is the worst thing that's going to happen if you don't have a copy and you need it at some point? Now, I doubt your world will implode, but by the same token, you need to have the confidence that you can get another copy so that you can very freely release documents that you no longer need or really need to keep. Think about the 80% of papers that land up in file cabinets these days that are never accessed again. That's a tremendous amount of real estate being devoted to files and papers that aren't really needed. Some other strategies I could share with you that will help in limiting the amount of information you're filing are as follows. You could try instituting the originator's rule. And what this means is that the person who creates a document within your organization is the one responsible for filing it, whether it be digitally or in paper copy or both. So there's only one copy to be saved instead of 5 or 6 saved by different people. So that's one way to try to limit the amount of stuff that's being collected. Also, I would highly recommend that you set up and create retention guidelines for your organization. Have your financial and legal advisors weigh in and set up some guidelines in terms of what needs to be kept and for what duration. This is especially helpful to have at the end of the year when you're doing a file cleanout. So you'll know exactly what needs to be retained and what can be trashed at that given point. Okay, so we've talked about creating a productive environment in a command center, how to make decisions about paper, what questions to ask yourself so you can make those decisions, as well as using the FAT acronym as a way to process what's on your desk so you're keeping it clearer and with less distractions. Okay, let me tell you about Neil as we segue into the section on email and time management. Neil is an insurance broker, and he really can't seem to get ahead of all his email. He's got a lot of work-related email, as well as he's an avid networker, so he's got a lot of emails from his networking colleagues. Little does everybody know that his anxiety is really off the charts. He has over 30,000 messages in his inbox, and he really doesn't want to delete any. He doesn't want to move any into folders. He's really uncomfortable with making any changes. But by the same token, it's very overwhelming every time he looks at his inbox. The tsunami of email is really controlling his life. He'll set his daily priorities, and then he'll go on to email, and the priorities get totally shifted and forgotten about, and those tasks that really needed to be done that day now are forgotten. So it's totally out of control, and he doesn't know what to do about it. So he was asking me for some suggestions. I offered the following. I told him to really sit down and assess his current email habits. And once he had done that, to try to establish some more effective strategies for managing the email and start to phase them in over time so that he would start to see some changes and some success. He started to do that, and as of today, he's actually regained about half an hour each day because he's being so much more effective with his email, and he's no longer riddled by all the worry that it was causing him. So in order to really make some headway with your email and come up with a better approach for managing it, an assessment is really the way to start, especially in light of the fact that the average employee checks his or her email 36 times an hour. That doesn't leave very much time during the day to do very much else. So I would really recommend assessing email habits. And when you're doing so, really be honest and collect the data because that will give you the starting point for making some changes. So some of the questions to consider answering are as follows. Number one, when do you check your email during the day? Is it at random times or is it on a set schedule? How frequently during the day do you check your email? How many times? Is it 5 times? Is it 25 times? Each time you're checking your email, how long do you spend on the email? Number 4, how many emails do you actually get every day? And number 5, do you actually process your email when you're checking it or just check it? And by processing it, I mean you're only going to be responding to those messages that can be dealt with in under 2 minutes. Anything else you're going to deal with at a later point in time. So once you collect this data, then you can create some more effective procedures for managing your email. You can look at things like creating a schedule for actually processing. You can actually look at writing more effective email messages, so hopefully you'll get less emails. And then you can also set your expectations for response time. How quickly are you going to be responding to emails so that you can manage your own behavior as well as your recipients having a sense of when they might hear from you. So like everything else I've been saying, all these systems require changes to habits, and habits take a little while to stick, so maybe up to 21 days or more. So start phasing them in slowly so you can ensure your success over time. Okay, so let's talk about some time management strategies. Time management is really the key to maximizing productivity. So let me tell you briefly about Debbie. Debbie is an entrepreneur. She's a writer. She's the mother of 4, and she's working on her advanced degree. Definitely an overloaded plate. When I first met with her 6 years ago, she went to grab her week at a glance 8.5 by 11 calendar, and it was probably about 5 inches thick. Those books are typically about a ½ inch thick. So she opened it up, and there was this shower of paper that exploded out of it. We turned to the appropriate week, and I did a double take because there was not one area of blank space on these 2 pages. There was writing everywhere, in every direction, in every color ink, and I couldn't figure out how she would know what she needed to do, let alone where she needed to be. So this was the system she was using. So her life, when it got really chaotic, was totally out of control. In fact, it got so bad that her family would run for cover. So here we are 6 years later. She's got a calendar. She's got a separate book for keeping track of her to-dos. And she still has some papers in the calendar, especially when life gets a little crazy. But she recognizes now when she's starting to backslide. So she will immediately stop and start recording everything into the to-do list and on the calendar and get rid of all the paper. So she's very much more in control and very much calmer. So now when things really get crazy, she'll just sit back and she'll think to herself, what would Stephanie say? And she'll figure out how to deal with the situation and life will go on. So time management, as I mentioned, is really the key to maximizing productivity. But it's really important to realize that time management is all about managing yourself and your activities. It isn't about managing time because we can't control that, but we can control ourselves. We have to recognize that there's a finite amount of time. We all have that 168 hours every week, and probably an infinite number of tasks that we're trying to achieve or accomplish. So we want to be protective of our time and proactive concerning how we're using it. This way we can ensure that there's time available to address the personal and professional goals that we've set for ourselves. There are plenty of challenges with trying to manage our schedules and ourselves. First and foremost, we tend to be overly ambitious in terms of what we can get done, and we don't say no. And I know this is something I fall victim to. There are some days I wake up and look at my calendar and wonder what I've gotten myself into. But it's something we need to be aware of so we can start making some changes. We don't always know how long it's going to take us to do certain things. So that way, because we don't necessarily know how much time to book on our calendars for these tasks. So we tend to overbook or underbook ourselves. We also tend to practice an all or nothing approach. And by that I mean, we tend to think, okay, I'm going to work on this project this afternoon and think we're going to be able to get the whole thing cranked out in one afternoon. In a lot of cases, that's not possible. It's better to divide the project into a series of stages or steps and schedule time for each one over a period of days or weeks, depending on what the deadline is. Some strategies to consider would be delegating. And yes, we all know about delegating, but we don't always practice what we know. A lot of times we're thinking if we want something done right, we might as well do it ourselves. That's not necessarily the best approach. There are certain things that maybe we just need to stop doing altogether. Other things that maybe need to be done, but maybe we delegate them to somebody else, give them an opportunity to learn more, get more involved, gain other experiences. Everything needs to have a deadline. Even those tasks that are like sort of vague, where it's like, okay, get to this whenever you have a moment kind of situation, because those kinds of tasks always get pushed to the bottom of the to-do list. That is until you wake up one day and all of a sudden somebody's asking for that information, and of course it hasn't been addressed yet. And then it's a matter of knowing what your prime time is. You know, are you a morning person, an afternoon person? Because once you know that, that's the time of day where you want to tackle that top priority for the day, especially those that are more challenging. So know yourself so that you can schedule your time accordingly. Okay, so we've covered a number of areas. We've talked about a productive environment in a command center and learning about how to manage them. We've also talked about paper and what to do with it, how to make those critical decisions, and how it integrates it back into the command center. And then as it relates to email, creating some better habits and better systems for tackling what we need to do. And time management, my takeaway on that would be the word no. Learn to say no more frequently because that will make quite a difference. And across all of these, there are habit changes that have to be made. So, phase things in over time uh, so that you'll set yourself up for tremendous success. Okay, I always tell my clients, in wrapping up, that success is achieved in baby steps. Being productive and in control of your daily activities is definitely within reach once you've taken that first step or bite of cheesecake. So get started and start to enjoy the benefits. Okay, we're going to be taking questions shortly. I just wanted to remind everybody that there is a resource sheet that I have created. It includes some tech tools that will help improve productivity, so feel free to download it as appropriate.
Thanks, Stephanie. I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box or you can email info@savvyladies.org. So we'll get started with the first question here. The question is, if I don't have a reminder list written and kept in front of me, I won't remember the things I need to do. But as the day goes by and more papers take over my desk, it's really hard to keep a handle on everything. What do you suggest for this?
Okay, well, you might want to set some, I don't know what system you're using, but possibly set some alerts, divide your day into two halves maybe and have an alert set for the top one or two tasks that need to be done in the morning and the same thing in the afternoon. So you have some way to, some trigger to keep the tasks on your radar.
Okay, great. Thank you. And the next question, I have thought about limiting my time checking emails and designating only certain times of the day to check them. My fear is that I'll miss an important email that needs to be dealt with right away. How do I balance that fear with the efficiency that I imagine comes with only checking emails during certain times?
Okay, well, the question is how frequently do you really receive an urgent email? Chances are, I'm assuming it doesn't happen that frequently. In any case, I would suggest that you schedule the times you're checking based on the volume of email you receive every day. So if it's a lot of email, probably you need to be checking in on your email maybe 5, 6 times a day. It depends on the type of business you're in and the volume of the email. And I would just suggest that if in fact something is really urgent, if somebody can't reach you via email, chances are they're going to call you. So there is a way for them to reach you if in fact you haven't caught up with the email before they reach out to you via other means.
Okay. And another question is about photos. I work from home and my office area is a bit messy, including all the photos that I have stored there. Do you have any suggestions for dealing with photo management?
Photos, I'm not sure if you're talking about physical photos that are on your desk or workspace or personal photos that you keep digitally that you're trying to file. So I'm not sure what direction this question is going in. If it's the physical photos that are on your desk, I would suggest that you try to limit the number. You can basically determine what's an appropriate number based on the size of your desk, and then rotate them every couple of weeks or once a month, so that you give them all fair time, so to speak. If it's actually managing the digital files, there are different ways to do that. I'm not an expert in photo management, but if that's your question, please email me offline and I'd be happy to make some recommendations.
Okay, great. Well, those are all. Oh, I think we have another. Okay, sorry, we do have another question if you have time for it.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I get lost with files on the disk. Every time I decide on a different location on the disk, files could be anything. I'm a programmer, so most of my files can't be in the cloud. Do you have some advice for that?
Okay, so obviously the files need to be stored locally as opposed to in the cloud from the way that question is worded. Um, well, even storing them locally, there still needs to be some organizational system involved in the way they're stored. Some kind of file uh, methodology that's being applied so that it's very easy to locate them and you know where to put new files as they are created. So I would suggest that you still create some kind of methodology and follow it uh, regardless, because you want to make it easier to find things as quickly as possible.
Okay. Well, those are all the questions we have for now. So I'll just remind everyone that the link you're seeing here for the resource sheet from Stephanie will be sent out in an email. So I want to thank you, Stephanie, for a really great presentation and lots of helpful tips. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. And thank you again, Stephanie.
My pleasure. Thanks, Maggie.